Well, this week, Governor Ron DeSantis effectively asked the state legislature for his very own election police force. It's called the Office of Election Crime and Security. It would, quote, investigate, detect, apprehend, and arrest anyone for an alleged violation of election laws, acting on tips from government officials or any other person. The 52-member police squad would cost taxpayers almost $6 million. The real problem with the proposal is there is no evidence of widespread voter fraud anywhere in Florida, and even less evidence the problem warrants a special police force. For the record, of the more than 18 million votes cast in Florida throughout 2020, Florida officials referred just 75 complaints to local law enforcement. At that rate, it is essentially a non-issue. Don't believe me? Well, you can just ask DeSantis himself.
The way Florida did it, I think inspires confidence. I think that's how elections should be run. We're now being looked at as the state that did it right and the state that these other states should emulate.
So that was in November of 2020. Did that sound like a governor so concerned about election integrity that he needs a new office with more staffers than most police departments to combat the problem? Opponents say it's about much more than that.
For the governor to double down on these efforts now when there was no evidence of voter fraud or elections fraud during the 2020 election suggests to me that this also is politically motivated.
Politically motivated. It is no secret DeSantis is weighing a 2024 presidential run, but this brings political pandering to a whole new level. And in Georgia, former GOP senator turned candidate for governor David Perdue is following suit, promising to make his own election police force if he wins. It's only a matter of time before other Republican-led states join in too. But let's be clear, Perdue and DeSantis claim this is about protecting election integrity. But what it would really do is erode what little trust is left in our democracy. And joining me now to discuss is Professor of African American Studies at Vanderbilt University, Michael Eric Dyson. His new book is called Entertaining Race, Performing Blackness in America. Entertaining Race, there we go. You've studied voter suppression for years. Give us your reaction to this Republican push for these election police forces.
Well, as you eloquently stated it, Ms. Brown, this would tend to discourage legitimate voters from coming to the polls. Black voters, poor white voters, elderly voters are already subject to arbitrary forms of, kind of lockdown when it comes to voting, being misled by robocalls, having ID laws stringently applied. You can have an ID for a gun and you can register or be accepted to vote, but not if you have one for SNAP or one for a student ID. So we know that the targeting of communities of color, of poor communities, of younger populations is what the ultimate goal here is. And if the governor said that Florida was the exemplary state, the paradigm of reasonable voting and legitimate voting, why now all of a sudden, without an outbreak of voter fraud here? As you've said, 75 cases referred to the police out of 18 million votes. That's an extraordinary record and one to be commended. And so what we know here is that voter suppression is afoot, that the Republicans have introduced laws in 48 state legislatures and some 400 bills to, in one way or another, suppress the vote of people of color, of poor people, of elderly people. And it reeks of fascist retaliation against the fact that these people have turned out in record numbers to vote. Why don't the Republicans want more votes, not less? More people involved in the process of democracy, not less. If you're invested in making America the best that it can be, then we want every vote to count.
Do you see similarities between this and some of the suppression tactics used against African Americans during Jim Crow?
There is no doubt about it. Think about policemen on horses riding roughshod over vulnerable populations. Think about the bicuspids and incisors of police dogs ripping at the flesh of black people. Think about jelly bean tests. Think about poll tests. Think about literacy tests. All of these shenanigans and stratagems were deployed to try to prevent black people from exercising their vote and leverage at the polls. And so I see there's a striking similarity and a dangerous one between what went on in the 50s and 60s in this country and what's going on today in the name of expanded democracy and attacks against voter fraud.
It is true, though, that there is a problem with trust in the system among Republicans. Just 13% say they are very confident in our election system, and a majority say they believe Trump won the election. DeSantis says this is about increasing their confidence in the system. What do you say to that argument?
Yeah, that's not true. First of all, it is a shame and atrocious that 13% of Republicans believe that the election was stolen. This is the trumpeting of a Trump who refuses to accept the fact that he lost fair and square. And so the big lie has been amplified in states even that Mr. Trump went after. When you think about Arizona or Georgia or even in Pennsylvania, these Republican strongholds, at least in terms of the officials there, said, no, we are not the ones who engaged in stratagems of suppression and that the vote couldn't be trusted. But here we find out, as soon as the votes have been certified and democracy took place in a reasonable fashion, they turn around to introduce laws that will powerfully suppress the vote of African American people. And we know, for instance, among many Republicans, they have the same outlook that Mitch McConnell does. He said that African Americans vote in the same numbers that Americans do. Wait a minute, when were we part of a different nation? When were Black people part of an other congregation of voices who were outside of the precincts and providence of American democracy? We know that there is a sense of Black people as the other, and these stratagems, deployed by Republicans reveal their beliefs essentially about Black citizenship not being legitimate.
And Mitch McConnell made that comment Wednesday. He came out Friday, 2 days later, to directly address the mistake, saying it was inadvertent. But nonetheless, Michael Eric Dyson, thank you for coming on and sharing your really important perspective on this topic.